Hi there, this is episode 1 of How to Run a Salesforce Freelance Business, a podcast mini-series on salesforceben.com. In this series, we dig into real-world discussions of how to start and thrive as a Salesforce freelancer. My name is Brian Shea. I'm a Salesforce architect, I'm a self-employed consultant, and I'm the host. In this episode, I'll be talking with Lucy Mazalon. She's the founder of The Drip. She's the editor of SalesforceBen, and she's a self-employed Pardot and Salesforce consultant. In this episode, Lucy and I talk about her experience as a freelancer, and we dig into the different ways to generate business and to get clients. We kicked off our conversation by talking about why she decided to start freelancing.
I think it all depends on the lifestyle that you want. Mm-hmm. And for me personally, what I wanted out of a career, aside from being fulfilling in terms of being knowledgeable and obviously making money, I also wanted to be location independent. Okay. And more, for me, I don't mind working in intense bursts than taking a break. So that's how it suited me. I'd rather have that flexibility to mix and match my schedule and do it that way. So that's primarily why I went freelance.
And just some background for folks. Prior to going freelance, roughly speaking, how long did you have a, quote unquote real job before doing that?
Sure. So I started in the Salesforce ecosystem in the autumn, the fall of 2014. And I went freelance roughly the same time in 2017. So 3 years. Yeah. Cool. And I had a mixture of roles during that time as well.
In the full-time space or the freelance space?
In the full-time space.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah, I seem to, people could call it job hopping, but actually those different jobs that I had meant that I had a really diverse skill set in order to go freelancing and manage all the aspects of freelancing myself.
Yeah.
So it kind of turned out well.
Yeah. And when you did, so for those 3 years that you had a full-time job, I know Pardot is your, a big part of what you write about and what you do now is Pardot. Was the 3 years really focused on Pardot, or were there other things as well?
So I started off working for an app partner, a very big ISV of Salesforce. And I was doing kind of relationship management with partners. So I got to know the partner ecosystem really well and understand how Salesforce works as well. Mm-hmm. Then I moved into a smaller consultancy, and I was selling Salesforce implementation projects. That's when I got my admin certification as well, which I felt really helped me sell the projects. But then I was also selling cross-cloud. So that's when I really got to know the different clouds and how complex a project could be in each cloud. And during that time, I took my Pardot certification. Yeah. Then following that, I got the opportunity to move to Poland. And the job that I picked to go for in that consultancy was Pardot Consultant.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so that's how I got into Pardot Consulting. It was kind of here's a selection of roles you could choose from. And because I had that cross-cloud experience, I was drawn to Pardot. Yeah,
and so prior to going freelance, you had experience on multiple clouds. Mm-hmm. You had consulting experience, particularly in Pardot, and you also had selling experience as well.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So I had experience with the partner ecosystem as well as selling, as well as being self-managed in that consultancy as well, with different size clients. So I was able to manage my own projects basically in that consultancy.
That's awesome. Yeah, because I know when I went, you went sort of freelance in 2017. I went freelance in 2012, and I had
You're a veteran at
this. A glutton for punishment at this. So I didn't have any consulting experience, and I didn't have really any sales experience, and I was able to make it all work. But it's a, you know, a huge advantage to be able to like understand the sales process. You know, just from a business perspective, interpersonal perspective, and be able to, you know, sell your stuff, you know, your services.
There's lots of different aspects to it that maybe people don't initially think about when they want to go freelance. Things like the business finances as well, like running a business, just lots of different things. And I felt that I was able to call upon on this past experience to help me with that.
Yeah.
But then as I went, I didn't just like leap into freelancing either. I was quite fortunate to do it step by step gradually. So I was on projects in Belgium.
Yeah.
And I was moving back to the UK. So I then back from Poland to the UK. So to continue on the Belgian projects, I went contracting for that consultancy in order to make the move back to the UK.
And this was sorry to interrupt you, but this was while you still had a full-time job and you did some contracting consulting on the side?
Sure. So I was an employee of the consultancy, but then in order to move back to London, I went contracting for that consultancy.
Oh, I see.
So yeah, so it was that meant I was starting to take responsibility for things like finances, for all of that stuff, being even more accountable than you would be under a company, I suppose. And then after that, I just slowly picked up different projects, more ad hoc ones as well in the beginning. That's basically my journey to freelancing.
So prior to sort of coming on air, you and I were talking a little bit about this concept of, there's a whole bunch of different ways to do freelancing, but there's sort of three different channels or three different paths or structures that are pretty common in the Salesforce space. One is contracting through a recruiter, and I'm using apologies, I'm using sort of US based terms. If there's different in the UK space, jump in and let me know. But
no, recruiters are good.
Okay. Okay. Recruiters and contracting is sort of one model where, you know, you would work with a recruiter and you get maybe a 6-month contract. That's 40 hours a week for 6 months. That's one role, one type. The second one is maybe subcontracting through a partner.
Yep.
And sometimes those are full-time, you know, 40 hours a week type of thing. Sometimes not. That's the second way. And the third way is to get your own clients directly. And, you know, sometimes those projects are big and sometimes it's a bunch of small ones. Can you talk a little bit about, we talked before, you said you've done all three of those models. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So maybe it's best then to go into the pros and cons of each. Absolutely. That's come to mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
So contracting via recruiter, I personally love talking to recruiters. I think they're great sources of information as well, and really great guys on the end of the phone. You know, it's their job to make friends. Yeah. So
you've got, by the way, you've got the greatest freelancer like skill set and personality, like sales experience, like hanging out with recruiters, consulting. This is like you're the perfect person.
Oh, thank you. No, in that guide I wrote a year or so ago, I think I put in like a one-woman band or something, like a picture of someone playing multiple instruments, because that's sometimes how I feel. But yes, recruiters, like I said, they're easy to chat to. They're a great source of information, and they are your eyes and ears for the job market. So what I find, I have maybe 2 or 3 recruiters that are specialized in Pardot that I know I can trust, that I have a good relationship with. They come to me if they've got something. And what recruiters can also do for you is they can negotiate your day rate for you. And they're just generally well connected with opportunities that are very high quality. So high quality organizations will go to a recruiter because they want high quality talent. So
Yeah,
Um,
they're a lot of times the leads are, generally speaking, a lot more serious. Like if they're going to reach out to a
yeah,
recruiter than some other situations.
yeah, exactly. You're totally right there. Um, a couple of cons, I suppose. They would try to put forward more candidates than, so you may find yourself up against more competition because they want to increase their chances of making a placement, which is fine. It's just you've got to shine through.
Yep.
Um, and if you end up talking with an inexperienced recruiter, they might try to match you up with something that's not very suitable. But you may not just be aware of that until you go for the interview. Then you're, just making sure that the recruiter also knows what they're talking about. And I don't think this is a common one, but potentially clients may reduce the day rate they pay you just because they've got to pay the overheads with that placement fee. So it's almost, as opposed to going direct, you could just cut out that big middleman. Some of the budget may be directed back to you. I don't know.
Right. One thing to call out, like I feel like, there are times when recruiters, like in general, kind of get a bad name. Like people are like, oh, they're just trying to put a placement. They have, they're not necessarily in the Salesforce space, but just kind of in the IT space. Sometimes people complain about recruiters. The thing that I've had similar experience with you in terms of having good experience with recruiters, really enjoying working with them. And I've taken a similar approach to you, which is, there's one or two or three that I have a connection with that I've worked with over time. And that works great because, one of the things is people sort of get a cold call from a recruiter and there's not really a relationship there. And then people are upset when the recruiter is like not super loyal to you. And it's like, you really haven't been loyal to the recruiter either. You're, they're, you're playing the field, they're playing the field. And like you said, part of a recruiter's job to some extent is to play the field, right? They need to, it's not just about you. But you can build good relationships with, one or two or three recruiters and give me a really good relationship that can get everybody business.
Yeah, exactly. And don't be afraid to give them information, like even if it's cold call, just saying, this is who I am, this is my niche, this is my speciality. Then they're not wasting your time, and be honest with them if something you really just don't want to do something.
Right.
Yeah. So feel free to say no.
Yeah. And like, recruiters, the good ones, they follow up, every 3 or 6 months or whatever. Like, you can be the one to follow up with them and say, hey, I'm coming up on on an end date. I'm going to be available. Like, let's talk. Just check in with them. Like, you're trying to run a freelance business. A lot of, they're trying to meet their quota, or they're running a business on their end. So,
yeah, it can be a match made in heaven.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was mode one, the recruiter route. And you said you have experience with the subbing route too.
Yeah. I would actually say this one's my favorite option.
Oh, okay.
So subcontracting would be when you join as, not as an employee, but join forces with a consultancy, with a Salesforce partner. So this has been a very good strategy for me. In the UK, there's a lot, everywhere, there's a lot of small consultancies that don't want to have a full-time Pardot consultant as a full-time employee. So when they have clients that have Pardot needs, like a Pardot implementation, they come to you. The main benefits are that they take care of the sales part of it, which can it's not billable time for you, so it can really soak up your time. They take care of chasing finances from clients. Another great benefit that I found working with one partner in the UK is they offer to pay for certifications and maintenance if you want to credit your certifications to their consultancy, which I'm happy to do because I'm not doing anything with them. That's been a big cost saving for me. Have someone sponsor my certifications almost. So that was a mutually beneficial relationship there. In terms of cons, I think it's all about the extra expectation. Sometimes there's more pressure because not only do you have to meet the client's expectations, but also you have to meet their expectations as well as at the consultancies. So you've almost like got two sides to manage, and you just don't want to make a mistake at all. They also take a bit of your profit in terms of, your day rate's going to be a little bit lower because they take a small amount though typically off of there. And also this might bother some people, but it doesn't bother me, having to say that you work for that company. It's called like being white labeled like a product. And you can make up a backstory if you want, or you could just be really sparse with the details, but some companies are quite hot on you saying that you absolutely work there.
Right. So that was actually one of the things I wanted to ask you about, was your experience of that. Because I'm the same way. Like, I don't particularly, some people have like really strong opinions about that. Like freelancers are like, I will not do that. I'm building my own brand, and that's fine. I mean, one of the questions would be like, if you're so big on doing your own brand, like, why are you subbing through somebody else? But one of the things that I've seen come up as a real practical thing is, Brian Shea, you can search for Brian Shea on LinkedIn and you see Brian Shea from Shea Consulting, freelancer, and if you white label through a larger partner, if it's a project of any kind of length, somebody on the client side is probably going to, run into you on LinkedIn and see that there's sort of, which isn't a huge deal, but have you ever run into that kind of a thing?
No, to be honest, if someone asks me outright, I do explain, it's quite a typical practice, and by that point as well, you've built up such rapport that they trust you anyway, and it's not even a big issue. And it's just not an issue at all, until clients try to take you direct. Right. Then you're like, okay, no, slow down. Never do that, because that's completely completely go behind the consultancy's back. So.
It's funny. This isn't in the Salesforce space, but I've got a friend who owns an agency, like ad agency, and she had, I think it was either an employee or a freelancer. The person was working in her agency, and one day the person went out and like pitched work to like all her clients directly, and she found out and she was like, okay, we're done here. It's the hugest, as a freelancer, it's like the hugest
goes through someone's mind.
Exactly. It's like the hugest thing you have, obviously, is like the trust and the relationships you build with people. It's amazing.
And also in the Salesforce ecosystem, this is an important point. Everyone knows everyone. Like, things get back to people, and you never know who knows who. It's really a well-connected place.
Yeah, I think, aside, obviously you need like your core, whatever skills, hard technical skills you're bringing to what you do. But right next to that is like the relationships you build. It's just old-fashioned trust, like doing good work, doing what you say you're going to do, like being straight up with folks. And with all the, I think that's a theme as we're talking through, like whether it's working with recruiters, whether working with partners, whoever, right? It's like, how would you want to be treated?
Yeah, exactly.
So the white labeling thing was a question. There was one other thing that I thought of as you were talking about working with partners. One of the, it's not exactly working with a partner, but subcontracting. There have been times, I've got a few larger consulting companies that I work with, and they're not Salesforce partners. They don't do Salesforce. They either do different kinds of technology, or they do like management consulting. And a lot of times with their projects, there's a big Salesforce component. They don't have a Salesforce team. So I work with them. Same idea, just not, they're just outside of the Salesforce ecosystem. That can be great too. And the benefit of that too is you get to be kind of the Salesforce expert on those projects.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of like my field in marketing agencies, there are tons of digital marketing agencies.
Right.
And if a client, like you said, if a client comes with a marketing automation with Pardot, then they have to either upskill very quickly on Pardot or get someone temporarily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the good news with all this stuff too, and even circling back to the white labeling thing and how to handle that, like the now versus 5 years ago or 10 years ago or whatever, it's so much more common for agencies to be, an agency, have some, partners, have some employees, but have contractors that they work with. And that's a totally acceptable model. It's a great model. It allows you to scale up and scale down. I feel like 10 years ago, there was much more of like hiding the fact that was happening. You know what I mean? Like, oh, look,
it's true. And I think customer and then client would be like, pretty foolish to push back on that when they're getting better resource, like when they're getting skilled people rather than people that are going to be like reading off the documentation as they go. Yeah.
And as an agency, like that's a skill. Having the network of consultants and contractors is a skill and a capability in and of itself, so it's like,
definitely.
So
to connect people.
Okay. So work mode number 3 is direct. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. Obviously the biggest benefits of this is that you have complete control over your day rates. You have complete control over project scope, like what's going to be delivered when. I'm not getting pressure from anyone else but the client.
That can be enough.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have anyone else breathing down your neck saying for this. Like, I suppose the biggest con, obviously, aside from getting clients yourself, like sourcing them and doing the sales, is that it's almost like more accountability to you. There's no escalation point. It's all on your head.
Good point. Yeah.
Whereas I don't know, maybe subcontracting, there may be people that can take on the workload or be an escalation point, but when it's just you are the escalation point.
Right.
So like switch out put on a different voice on the phone or something.
Yes, I am the manager. Can you talk? So the other thing, con in my mind in terms of the direct model, and I have to say in terms of all 3, like the direct model is the one that I like the most. I like the independence. I like the ability to kind of work with multiple clients at once, which I suppose you can do as a subcontractor too. But the thing that I see as a big con, along with the needing to be the escalation point, is it probably takes, all things being equal, probably takes a little bit more time doing your own marketing, doing your own new business. Which if you've got 45 or 50 hours a week and you're trying to bill, let's say 35, 30, 40, whatever, that leaves only a few to do the marketing. And I'm talking to the right person, because not only are you were a freelancer or are a freelancer, quite a bit about marketing within the Salesforce ecosystem with everything you do with SalesforceBen. So can you talk about that, like how you did that as a freelancer and thoughts on that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just before I do though, the point you made about working that many hours a week and then having to find the time to do other things. Honestly, like I was working really crazy hours in the beginning just because I was wanting to soak up as much revenue as possible, and experience as well. I was like, I want to go really fast and get loads of experience freelancing with different types of people. Anyway, that's another misconception, or not misconception, but another thing people don't think a lot about when they go freelance, is that your income is really tied to your time. You're running a services business and you are the product. So your business isn't going to make money while you sleep, because unless you nap. So that's just another important point. But anyway, so back to the blogging.
Yeah, and just that. No, I was just going to add to what you said. Like your time, it's directly associated with your time, and that's a
Yeah.
good thing. That there's benefit. We can go into the pros and cons of that, and we don't have time to do that now. But yeah, there's no. Folks need to understand that going in, right? So, and you need to understand also what you're willing to put in terms of time. Because I was similar to you, where like when I started, I was like, how do I figure this out? How do I make more? How do I like, at times make anything, and you want to go fast, but at some point, you may want to have more of a reasonable schedule, and you need to understand that if you've got 45 hours a week that you're going to do work, not all 45 of those can be billable, because you need to do stuff like blogging, managing the business, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And like put those in your calculations, those unbillable hours, because they will be more than you think.
Yes.
Especially if doing sales as well.
Yes.
And so I started running I run the Drip, which is like a marketing automation part of salesforceBen.com. It used to be separate, and then we merged them. Okay. I've known Ben for years, and have been contributing to SalesforceBen for years, also managing the guest poster content.
Okay. And did you start, I didn't realize that the Drip was separate. Did you start it as a totally independent thing, and then you sort of folded them in?
Yeah, exactly. It was, I just started documenting everything that I was learning while I was starting out consulting, because I was pretty much thrown at the deep end, but I liked that because I'd rather learn fast than learn slow. So I just started documenting everything to like solidify my learning. At the end of every day, I pretty much write one blog post just to like keep it in there. And I love writing, so that wasn't a big issue for me. And over time, the Drip's just grown, and especially merging with SalesforceBen, that's like my form of marketing. That's my form of building a personal brand. Although I am, the Drip doesn't immediately, Lucy Mazalon doesn't immediately spring to mind from the Drip. But that still gets me a lot of leads that come in because people find articles and they get in contact with XYZ Pardot problem they're having. And I've got quite a few clients from that. So I think that's almost like a lead magnet, having a blog that's addressing problems.
Just curious, and if just curious in terms of what time-wise, when did you start the Drip? 2017?
2016, I think.
2016. Okay, so 2016, 2017, first couple of years out. Roughly how many, like in an average week, and maybe there's not an average week, but how many hours did you spend building that blog up?
A lot. A lot. But this people used to ask me like, oh, what's your hobby? And I'd go, oh, traveling and Salesforce blogging, because I actually enjoyed it. So I enjoyed writing, and it was an asset that I was building over time. So many hours. I guess maybe at least 2 hours in the evenings. Obviously not every evening, and then most of weekends. Because also I was living abroad, so I had a lot of spare time sometimes.
That's, I mean, I know for me, and I'm sure for other people, I feel like just in general in freelancing, I underestimated the time it would take to do everything. And definitely true of new business or writing content takes longer than you expect. So, I think one of the things that you said is like, well, I enjoy writing. I enjoy blogging. I think it's important if you're doing it for the long haul, which, that's the way to do it. You got to do something you like, right? If you hate writing, blogging is not a good strategy,
Yeah, exactly. And when something starts to feel like work, then you're just like less motivated to do it in the evenings. But I get a real kick out of writing all the notes. Which is ridiculous to say, but true.
So sorry, on the third mode, did you have anything else that you wanted to dig into on that one before we?
Well, I guess, on the subject of getting your own clients, as well as building something like a blog, or it's also important with referrals. Really making a good impression with people, and referrals is probably the most lucrative way you're going to get business, rather than trying to go out and win new leads, like new customers, and like try to convince them. You'll be surprised, because people move around businesses, and they tend to take you with them. And like such a large number of businesses have Salesforce. It's crazy.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. Referrals is the most lucrative way. Another way I found is, not for me personally, because Pardot isn't very industry specific, but being industry specific. And if you're not, if you haven't, because in a consultancy, if you've been working for a consultancy, you don't always get a say over which projects you work on.
Sure.
You may, like me, have worked with several different industries, but never niche down into one of them. But that can be, if you're struggling to get clients, it could be a good way to look at a specific industry. And then I guess the final one that I had is, if you're again struggling to get clients or find a space in the market, is to become like cross-certified. So you can be someone that does Pardot and Social Studio, which is an unusual advertising studio, or CPQ and something. It's you can like have the two together, which can help for very specific projects. You'll be like the go-to person that recruiters or a consultancy would come to. And I like what you're talking about with the referrals, and the idea that folks move around, obviously. And just the same way we're talking about keeping in touch with your sort of recruiting partners, same thing with like former clients. And you mentioned you like blogging. Like I enjoy keeping in touch with people. So I'm somebody who will like follow up, call somebody 6 months after we worked and say how things are going. It's not like a new business tactic. I'm genuinely, I enjoy, most people I enjoy working with, I like talking with them about how things are going. So I agree. And for me, the user groups are the best way to do that.
You run the London group, right?
Yeah, I run the Pardot, B2B marketers group, but basically the Pardot user group. I've only I've been running it for about a year, but before that I would always try to make every single one of them, because I just absolutely love the community we have in London around Pardot. So it just makes it a real joy to be in this circle.
Again, you're doing I don't know if you call it a marketing activity, but a community activity that you enjoy doing. It's not like you're doing something just to get something out of it.
Yeah, exactly. Do you go to any user groups where you are?
So I am in Massachusetts, and I'm about an hour away from Boston, and there is a great user group that I just started going to. It's been around for a long time, but just started going to. It's the I don't know if it's called Metro West or Framingham. Framingham's like one of the hubs around here. There's a Boston group that's really big, and then there's one that us out in the suburbs do this other one. So and I'm with you. Like I love it. It's once a month, it's a couple hours. You get to sort of trade war stories with other people who are in the trenches and learn new stuff, and it's great. It's awesome. That's one of
natter and a rant sometimes.
Right.
Okay, because that's also Salesforce were built, like Salesforce's mentality was built on that. Like
Yeah.
they want people to be very authentic when they talk about the products.
Right.
So yeah, it's a good time to kind of validate, because when you're freelance as well, you're solo, sometimes you're on your own and you like, is it just me? Am I crazy? Or
Right.
is this, is there something like just like
right.
confirming things with other people?
Right. And what you were, you mentioned before, this idea of like finding your niche, right? Like what's your thing? And I know with me in the past, if I didn't spend time, doing user groups or going to conferences or doing stuff online in the Salesforce space, it's hard to figure out what other people are doing and kind of position yourself not against them, but to say, hey, if this person's great at CPQ, right? Well, what do I have? What can I offer that just a pure CPQ expert can't offer? It's really important to know the community for that purpose too.
Definitely. As well, and new opportunities. There's so many new products coming out as well.
Right.
And you could be someone that does Service Cloud, but also has a lot of experience with Einstein bots or voice, like Alexa skills that will be coming. There's lots of different potentials that you can take up.
Absolutely. So I'm looking at the clock.
Yeah.
As I'm not surprised, but we are like I said, everything takes longer than I had expected doing freelancing. We could talk for 4 hours about this. One thing you talked about, misconceptions earlier, and there's one misconception as we're talking about work modes. There's one misperception that I had, or misconception or whatever, that I had when I started earlier. And I really, for me, I started off like you, with sort of a contract, 40 hours a week type of thing for a number of months. And I always wanted to get to that direct thing where I had my own direct clients. And that's where I am now, and I love it, and it's awesome. At the same time, when I was starting, I was really looking at it as like doing the contracting was this stepping stone to ultimately being direct. And I had this fear of like, oh my God, what if I get a contract and then I go direct and I have clients, but then I need to go back to contracting. It was like this fear of like, oh my God, what could happen? And now I'm like, no, like these are 3 different models, and you may have your favorite, but they're all, you can take advantage of all of them, and it's not just a straight line. Can you talk about that a little bit? Like if you've had experience in that?
Definitely. And I'm someone that likes to mix and match as well. And I won't be afraid to admit that I do mix and match. I think the reason why people may say, oh, do contracting first, is because it means you can get a lot of the framework set up in terms of being self-employed, XYZ, without having the extra stress, and it's consistent as well. It's like more secure. So it really helps you get your feet first. But yeah, it's I flip between the two, and also some contracts aren't 5 days a week. I had a very long contract that was 3 days a week, and
that's great.
Well. Yeah, that worked well.
I've always had a tough time, not a tough time, but whenever those seem harder to come by in the recruiting space. A lot of times when they want someone 5 days. But
yeah, it depends on the business. If a business knows that they won't be able to move fast on their side with the project, sometimes there's space there to say, okay, well, if you only need me 3 days a week, then don't pay for 4.
Well, you and I should we should talk to the same recruiters then, or I should talk to your recruiters is maybe what I should do. But yeah, and one other thing too, you mentioned prior to this conversation, you mentioned that you had used, I forget what the platform was, but an online platform to get clients as well at the start.
Yeah, at the very start was Upwork.
Okay.
I haven't been on Upwork lately though, in terms of the Pardot market, but
it's
actually interesting because that's how I got even a couple of subcontracting
Oh, interesting.
relationships. So
Yeah.
even though Upwork is for ad hoc work, sometimes these inquiries, there are like diamonds in those
Yeah.
inquiries.
And,
Yeah.
and it's funny. That's another one where, sometimes Upwork kind of gets a bad name of, we're saying recruiters being super, it's a serious project when a recruiter reaches out. Upwork sometimes has the reputation of being the total opposite. Like it's like the tire kickers, people who are just sort of like, oh, what can I get? And,
Yeah.
but I know a bunch of freelancers who started on Upwork, and it's a great place to start. People, I mean, there's a lot of people on there who are looking for help.
Yeah.
And it can be a great place to start, or
Yeah.
maybe not even start. Great place to build your business. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And you just have to be aware of people that are going to be a time and energy sap.
Yeah.
And if it's really worth your time.
Yes. Yes. On Upwork.
Sometimes it's just not worth it, but other times you could have one thing could lead to another, and they could end up being a really long-term client. So you just got to really trust your gut with talking to people.
That's good advice on Upwork and off Upwork. So, well, this has been a great conversation.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed this.
I really appreciate it. And I think folks listening, I bet they enjoyed it too and got a lot out of it. So this was great. Thanks.